The world watched with bated breath. Russian drones crossed into NATO territory. Incidents in Romania and Latvia sent shockwaves through the international community. Could this be the first step towards a direct confrontation between Russia and NATO? NATO's response was swift condemnation and heightened vigilance. The incident exposed the fragility of peace in Europe. Romania, a nation on NATO's eastern flank, found itself on the front lines of a new kind of conflict. A Russian drone, likely returning from a bombing raid in Ukraine, strayed into Romanian airspace. It was a fleeting violation, but one with potentially profound implications. The Romanian government, acutely aware of its vulnerability, scrambled F-16 fighter jets. They were ready to defend their airspace, ready to meet force with force. Latvia too experienced the unsettling intrusion of a Russian drone. The unmanned aircraft, laden with explosives, crashed near the Latvian town of Rizekni. The incident sent shockwaves through the small Baltic nation, a country that had once been under Soviet rule. The message was clear: even NATO members were not immune from Russia's aggression. These incidents, though seemingly minor in the grand scheme of the war in Ukraine, were a stark reminder of the volatile security situation in Eastern Europe. They exposed the vulnerability of NATO's eastern flank, a region caught in the crosshairs of a geopolitical struggle between Russia and the West. The drone incursions were a test, a probing of NATO's defenses, a gauge of the alliance's willingness to respond to aggression. The drone incursions into NATO airspace have ignited a firestorm of debate among military strategists and policymakers. What did Russia hope to achieve? Was it a calculated act of aggression or a reckless mistake? More importantly, what happens next? The potential for escalation is very real. One possibility is an escalation in cyberspace. Russia could unleash a wave of crippling cyber attacks against NATO members. The most alarming scenario is a direct military confrontation between Russia and NATO. The consequences of a wider conflict between Russia and NATO are almost too terrible to contemplate. The human cost would be catastrophic, with millions of lives lost and entire cities reduced to rubble. The economic fallout would be equally devastating, plunging the world into a deep recession and triggering a global food crisis. The conflict would also have profound geopolitical implications. It would shatter the international order, erode trust between nations, and usher in a new era of global instability. The world would be divided into armed camps, with the United States and its allies on one side and Russia and its partners on the other. The specter of nuclear war, once unthinkable, would once again loom over humanity. The ripple effects of the conflict would be felt far beyond the battlefields of Europe. It would exacerbate existing tensions in the Middle East, Asia, and Africa, as countries are forced to choose sides. It would also embolden other authoritarian regimes, who would see in Russia's actions a blueprint for aggression and expansionism. Section 5. The imperative of unity and preparedness, a call to action. In the face of this unprecedented challenge, the international community must stand united. NATO, the cornerstone of European security for over 70 years, must demonstrate unwavering resolve in the face of Russian aggression. Its members must reaffirm their commitment to collective defense, making it abundantly clear that an attack on one is an attack on all. But unity alone is not enough. NATO must also bolster its military capabilities, particularly on its eastern flank. This means increasing defense spending, deploying additional troops and equipment, and strengthening air and missile defenses. It also means investing in new technologies such as hypersonic weapons and artificial intelligence to maintain a credible deterrent against any adversary. Equally important is the need for a comprehensive strategy to counter Russia's hybrid warfare tactics. This includes strengthening cyber defenses, countering disinformation campaigns, and supporting democratic institutions in countries vulnerable to Russian interference. It also means working with partners around the world to isolate Russia diplomatically and economically. Section 6. The role of military aid bolstering Ukraine's defenses. Ukraine, on the front lines of this unfolding crisis, needs and deserves the unwavering support of the international community. Providing Ukraine with the military aid it needs to defend itself is not just a moral imperative, it is also a strategic necessity. A strong and resilient Ukraine is the best deterrent against further Russian aggression. This aid should include a wide range of military equipment, including advanced air and missile defense systems, anti-tank weapons, artillery, and armored vehicles. It should also include intelligence sharing, training, and logistical support. The goal is to help Ukraine build a military capable of deterring and, if necessary, defeating a Russian invasion. Providing military aid to Ukraine is not without risks. Russia has repeatedly warned the West against supplying arms to Ukraine, threatening unpredictable consequences. However, the risks of inaction are far greater. Allowing Russia to conquer Ukraine unopposed would have devastating consequences for the Ukrainian people and for the international order. Section 7, the Cyber Battlefield, a new front in warfare. The conflict in Ukraine has underscored the growing importance of cyberspace as a domain of warfare. Russia, with its sophisticated cyber capabilities, has already launched numerous cyber attacks against Ukraine, targeting critical infrastructure, government websites, and financial institutions. These attacks are designed to sow chaos, undermine public trust, and erode support for the Ukrainian government. NATO must be prepared to respond to Russian cyber attacks with a credible deterrent of its own. This means strengthening the cyber defenses of its members, developing offensive cyber capabilities, and establishing clear red lines that, if crossed, will trigger a swift and decisive response. It also means working with private sector partners to share information and coordinate responses. The cyber battlefield is constantly evolving, and NATO must adapt to stay ahead of the curve. This means investing in research and development, training a new generation of cyber warriors, and developing international norms and standards for responsible state behavior in cyberspace. Section 8. The human cost of conflict, a looming humanitarian crisis. The war in Ukraine has already had a devastating impact on the civilian population. Millions of Ukrainians have been displaced from their homes, seeking refuge in neighboring countries or within Ukraine itself. Thousands have been killed or injured, and the number continues to rise with each passing day. The humanitarian crisis is likely to worsen if the conflict escalates. A wider war between Russia and NATO would result in mass casualties, widespread displacement, and a breakdown of essential services. The international community must be prepared to respond to this crisis with a massive humanitarian aid effort. This will require providing food, water, shelter, medical care, and other essential services to millions of people. It will also require addressing the long-term needs of those affected by the conflict, including trauma counseling, economic assistance, and support for rebuilding their lives. Section 9. The Information War, Propaganda, and Public Opinion. The conflict in Ukraine is not just being fought on the battlefields and in cyberspace, it is also being waged in the information environment, with Russia employing a sophisticated propaganda machine to shape public opinion at home and abroad. This propaganda is designed to discredit Ukraine, justify Russia's actions, and sow discord among Western nations. Countering Russian disinformation is essential to maintaining support for Ukraine and preserving the unity of the international community. This requires exposing and debunking Russian lies, amplifying credible sources of information, and supporting independent media outlets in Russia and beyond. It also requires addressing the root causes of susceptibility to disinformation, such as societal polarization, lack of trust in institutions, and the proliferation of misinformation online. Educating the public about the tactics and techniques of disinformation can help build resilience and make it more difficult for propaganda to take root. Section 10. The Search for a Diplomatic Solution, a Glimmer of Hope. Even as the drums of war beat louder, the search for a diplomatic solution to the crisis in Ukraine must continue. While the prospects for a negotiated settlement may seem dim at present, the alternative, a wider war between Russia and NATO, is simply too horrific to contemplate. Any diplomatic solution must be based on the principles of respect for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, the withdrawal of Russian forces from Ukrainian territory, and accountability for war crimes committed during the conflict. It must also address the legitimate security concerns of all parties, including Russia. Achieving a lasting peace will require difficult compromises from all sides. It will also require sustained engagement from the international community, including the United States, the European Union, and key regional actors. The stakes are too high, and the consequences of failure too great to allow this conflict to escalate further. Section 11. The Future of NATO, a defining moment for the alliance. The crisis in Ukraine has presented NATO with its most serious challenge since the end of the Cold War. NATO's response to Russian aggression will shape its future and European security. Strength and unity will make NATO stronger than ever. It will show its relevance and commitment to defending its members. A clear message to aggressors: challenges will be met with decisive response. If NATO falters, it risks irrelevance and weakened international order. The future of NATO, Europe, and peace hang in the balance.